My name is Jeff Camp. I'm the Education Chair for Full Circle Fund. I'm also the primary author of ed100.org. I prepared this presentation to support the kickoff of our 2013 grant cycle. But before I speak about education, I want to talk about urgency. 5 years ago, almost to the day, I woke up with a headache and a terrible sense of disorientation. It took a while for doctors to figure out that I had suffered a seizure and that the root cause was a brain tumor. It was about the size of a small mandarin orange. My sister called it an evil tangerine. It had to come out. This is the kind of news that makes you stop and think. A few things were clear to me. At the time, my kids were 4, 7, and 8 years old. I felt good about spending lots of time with my family. I regretted that I hadn't followed through on my childhood dream of writing music, and I felt good about the time that I spend working for the public good, especially with members of Full Circle Fund. There are lots of important long-term challenges in this world. I've chosen to focus on education because I think it's primary. Big problems are easier to address with a universally educated public. Universal public education is a fairly recent idea. It's only been about 100 years ago that America's children were compelled by law to go to school. The Europeans did it first. America came along later. Pressure for universal education came from an alignment of 3 perspectives. The labor movement wanted to get kids out of the workforce because they depressed wages. The establishment needed a credible response to the populist appeal of Bolshevism. And, on their way to demanding the vote, America's women became organized around the idea of providing a better future for children. Never, ever doubt the power of moms. Universal public education is a huge undertaking. Think there are a lot of Starbucks? There are 5 times as many public schools. In California alone, there are about 10,000 of them, with nearly 300,000 teachers and 6 million students. Broadly improving results in a sector this massive is really, really hard. Universal public education is tightly connected to the American dream. With persistence and hard work, anyone can make it. We have to make public education work. It's not optional for America. Universal public education provides 13 years of schooling at the public expense. Here's the total cumulative public investment on average for each California student. It's a pretty big number, right? But in a few slides, I'm going to put it in context. California dollars for education are actually part of the problem. More importantly, it would be false to think that $121,000 is the real amount invested in each child's basic education. My wife and I discuss homework with our kids every day, and our kids are growing up in a setting with lots of good examples and few distractions. The truth is that we don't have any system whatsoever to value in dollars the difference in preparation that students receive. Education and economic opportunity tend to run in families. Today, education tends to work well for the wealthy and poorly for the poor. As a society, we can't afford to be satisfied with that. So here's the question Full Circle members have been asking over the last 10 years by working together. How can education work better? And what can we do to help the leaders that are on the right track? The Education Circle has spent quite a bit of time over the years exploring ideas for change. In ed100.org, we created about 100 topic primers covering pretty much every aspect of theories of change for education. The Ed Prezi, pictured here, is a visual presentation of the structure of ed100. Starting at Circle 1 on top, it's organized under the structure Education is students and teachers spending time in a place for learning with the right stuff and a system that supports success. Each primer uses about 500 words to document what we know about the research, policies, and organizations connected with each approach. It covers everything from school uniforms to teacher pensions. There aren't magic answers, but I guarantee that if you read all of the Ed 100 primers, you will become an edu-dangerous person, armed with the power of knowledge. Obviously, we, Full Circle, can't invest in all these approaches at once. On Wednesday, February 6, 2013, members of the Full Circle Education Circle gathered to form what we call inquiry teams, groups that identify questions about how to make education work better. These teams form questions and set out to find answers, but even more importantly, in the process, we find amazing people who really need our help to punch a hole in the universe. In this presentation, I want to suggest several questions that seem worthy of pulling a team together to explore them. Technology has transformed every sector of our modern life, right? Even schools and school systems are now beginning to feel the possibility of change from technology. Man, this is a really interesting time. It's an early stage moment when fairly small investments can have a big impact. We have already made some investments in this area, forming partnerships in support of InnoSight, Leadership Public Schools, and the Khan Academy. There is a lot to be done and learned in this area, and an inquiry team could have a really great time finding a great way to leverage their time and their energies. Enough said. Standards. Now, California was one of the early adopters of the idea that there should be grade level standards for each subject. Assessments, tests, are built to measure student mastery of these standards. And until now, those standards have been different state by state, and they've also been rather narrowly defined. Inquiries in this area could take a couple of directions. First, we're about to make a big leap to a new set of standards, known as the Common Core standards, which will spawn a new generation of tests. Districts and schools and teachers and leaders are starting to wrestle with this change. Discontinuities like this present a rare opportunity to make a difference. On the fringes, there's a growing sense that maybe the whole idea of grade levels is broken. If a student hasn't mastered math that the standards associate with fourth grade, does it make sense for the student to just get a bad grade and advance to the fifth grade math anyway? On the other hand, if a student's ahead of pace, does it make sense to hold that student back? As if that's not enough, the Common Core revision of standards also could provide an opportunity to create new measures of success beyond math and reading scores. Now, the Boy Scout model of merit badges has been getting a little bit of discussion lately and some interest as a way to boost the rewards of innovation. This one is close to my heart. 100 years ago, a movement of women caused a change in society, bringing public education to universal application throughout America. Change happens when people demand it effectively. But today, the voices for change in education are neither loud nor particularly unified. So how can we help awaken public demand for education change? And finally, let's talk about resources. Sadly, this California is a high-cost state, and we have more students per grown-up than most states. Too little money is manifestly part of the problem in California's schools. This is a graph of education funding in 1970. Each bubble represents a state, and the size of the bubble represents the number of students in the state. Big bubble, lots of students. The arrow points to California. The big circle off to the right, that's New York. The horizontal axis shows dollars per student. Further right means more money. The vertical axis shows students per teacher. Up high, big classes. The color heat of each bubble represents funding effort. Warmer states invest a larger percentage of their overall economy toward K-12. Cooler states invest a smaller percentage. The hot dot next to New York is Alaska. By 1981, all the states gradually had put less of their economy toward K-12 education, but all hired more teachers. Class sizes went down. California began a trajectory as a sad exception. Mid-pack dollars per student, but big class sizes. Very little changed for the 10 years to 1991. Other states increased their efforts to fund education, becoming a little warmer, and moved up a bit in expenditures. But California and Utah remained way out of orbit. Big classes and low funding per student. California clawed its way closer to normal in the late 90s, and in the year before the Great Recession, California was badly behind the other states, with teacher ratios even higher than Utah and twice the levels in New York and New Jersey. California at this peak had for many years persisted with America's worst ratios, worst teacher ratios, counselors, administration. California had among America's worst scores for black students, Latino students, white students, poor students, and rich students. Maybe small differences in resources may not make a big difference, but that isn't the question for California. Big differences sustained over time do matter. The Great Recession clobbered public education funding most everywhere, but other states did a better job at protecting kids. On an inflation-adjusted basis, California's funding per student and aggregate student-teacher levels were smacked back to levels that look a lot like 1981. Funding per student in California stands at half that of New York. Now, I don't think that Californians love their kids less than New Yorkers do. It has to do with the way our systems are set up. Now, changing systems and the way they're set up, that's the kind of thing that determined leadership can do something about, maybe with some determined supporters like people in Full Circle Fund. To climb out of the funding basement, California needs to change its system of funding education to engage political will at both the state level and the local level. One approach to addressing this challenge is to learn from 22 other states that allow local funding for schools and use an approach called local effort equalization to make it equitable. More about that is available on ed100.org. Again, resources are just one of the possible levers for change that could help education work better. In this presentation, I've highlighted 4 areas of inquiry that I think are important and timely. As we begin our inquiry process, I know that when we meet, there will be vigorous discussion about these ideas and others. I started this presentation with one word: urgent. We all have choices about how we invest our time and talents. I draw a lot of pleasure from working alongside other people who are determined to make a difference. Let's make some important things happen, shall we?